Hi, pretty little lifters. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm going to be chatting with guest Andrea and Calais. I connected with Andrea via Instagram, and she was telling me about how she liked what I was doing with my PE program and how she saw some red flags with her kids' PE program. Her and her partner, Calais, decided to do something about it, and they're here to share with you what they did to advocate for change in their school's PE program and what parents can do if they also need to advocate for change. Now let's welcome to the podcast, Andrea and Calais. Welcome to the podcast, Andrea and Calais.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So just so everyone can recognize your voice, let's have you introduce yourself so our listeners can hear your voice, and just let us know who you are and maybe anything else you'd like us to know before we kind of dig into our topic today.
My name's Andrea, and I am the step-parent figure in this situation, and my partner, Calais, is with me here.
I'm Calais. We have two school-aged kids, one high school student, and the other one is in middle school here where we live.
Amazing, amazing. So let's talk about how we connected. So I connected with Andrea on social media after, she DM'd me and you were kind of excited about what I was doing in PE. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, because you had mentioned that you were a parent and that you were like, I think it'd be so cool if my my kids had a program like this. And you were kind of describing that to me. So maybe if you could give our listeners some background of what was going on at the school that you thought, you know what, I'm ready for change. I know I talk about this a lot on my Instagram account that I am ready for PE to be taken a little more seriously. I would love to see it more modernized. It is 2024. Some of the practices that I see are just, they need a little makeover. You know what I mean? We need to revamp some of this stuff. We have so much new research and information and best practices out there. And I know collectively sometimes PE teachers get a bad rep too for sometimes being a little lazy, a little old school. And I want to change that, because as somebody who has worked with kids and adults, I see so many adults that don't have the physical education and just movement patterns and skills to give them lifelong health and fitness. And I'm like, wait, we missed a beat somewhere. Let's go back. So what did you guys kind of notice as some maybe red flags, and maybe people listening can be like, yeah, my kids program is kind of like that too. What were some things that you guys started to notice that brought all this attention up?
We'll go back a year to the start of freshman year. So that would have been the 22 to start of 2022 school year. And I'll just disclaimer, I did not take regular PE in high school. I was an athlete, so I have had one of those exemptions. And so our teenager brings home her PE, all the forms that come home first week of school, and says, can you sign this? And I look at it and I'm reading through the policy. It all looks kind of, your basic policy, but there are two things that sort of were highlighted for me. And it was the participation. Any absences, even if they're excused, you'd lose a day's point, or the points for the day. So I think the points were 8 points a day. And if you don't make it up, excused absence, that means sick, whatever, you lose those points. And that's how your grade goes down a ton. The other big red flag, and the reason I did not sign, I refused to sign this policy, was the test that was given to kids was running a mile, and you're graded based on your time. So the fastest time you could run it, the best time
the A standard,
thank you, was a 7:30 minute or faster mile. You get the full 20 points.
Wow, that is speedy.
It's an elite time. And then it drops down from there to where anything slower than 9:30. Is that right?
I think it technically becomes an F points wise at a 10-minute mile.
You basically fail the exam.
Yeah.
And I told my daughter, I said, I'm not signing this. And I told her not to sign it. She said, well, I can't not sign it. So I said, that's fine. I'm going to email. And so that started our battle with the department and the school and the district on this policy was this whole thing. And I started at the bottom, went through a teacher who said, I've been with the school for 10 years and this is what it's been. I'm a dance teacher. I'm not changing it. I can't change it. You're going to have to go above me.
Wow.
So that was what was started. I then did some digging. I found out that this has been an ongoing issue for years, and I'm not sure why the parents gave up prior to me like starting this. I know a couple more have. I know there was a parent that talked to the principal about this policy this year. I think there were a couple other people that within the last year and now wrote to the school board or went to the district. But it was all before me. I know there was a ton of complaints about this PE department, a lot of fighting, but no changes until I guess December.
Yeah.
December of 2023 is when they finally implemented a change.
Wow.
So effective this spring semester.
And I told
That is wild.
the initial PE teacher, I quote unquote said, I'm going to die on this hill. I'm not dead.
Yes.
I feel like I won, but there was a lot of things that came up in between that initial email. So September 2022, meetings, phone calls, a lot of fighting, a lot of research between the two of us. Andrea spoke at a school board meeting at the start of the school year. And I think that was the big turning point, was her going to the school board meeting and speaking, and that got something on the agenda, and it changed.
Wow. So I want to like touch on, just in case like PE teachers are listening to this too. And like, this is how we advocate for change, you know? So the first thing I want to touch on is how you said that students were losing their points for the day when they were absent. And I guess the way I think about this too, and this is why it's like, you know, PE is seen as like a whatever class, but it's like, I tell everyone, I want my class to be as important as a math class, you know? And I feel like if you went to a math class, you wouldn't lose your points for the day if you were absent. You would be given an assignment to make up, you would be having another opportunity. So I think, to me, like, yes, that is a huge red flag. And, you know, that's something that, you know, when we kind of revamped our program and I came to the school, like, that was not even like, and it's weird because I do remember, now that I think about it, there was a lot of like questions, because I think parents were coming from like other types of PE programs, and they were like, well, what happens like if they're absent? Like, it was the end of the world. And I was like, they'll just be there when they, you know, like, check to see if they missed anything. And guess what? We move every day, so they will do the thing then. And especially, like, I tell my students, like, if there's something like we were doing a performance assessment or something that like we were just doing something that day, you know, we talk about like, okay, how can we make this up? Or guess what? You'll just have to do it another opportunity. Like, it's really like not the end of the world, you know?
Well, our kid has run sick when she was in PE.
Yeah.
She would run. She was like, I can't miss class.
Yeah.
Because the only option to make it up was you lose your lunch period, or you lose what they have, an advisory period, which is really should be spent doing things like math, their academic stuff that they can. And I'm not saying not. Sometimes go ahead, take that advisory period and go run a mile or do your push-ups, whatever you missed in PE, whatever the teacher thinks is important.
Yeah.
For these kids, it's running. That's how you make it up, either at lunch or this advisory period. And for her advisory period was when she can get help from her peers with any academic stuff.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
So I don't know, what is your policy on absences, excused, unexcused, whatever it is?
So pretty much like what I do is, because I have a program where like we're kind of touching on things each week. Like, for example, like I had a student the other day, they missed our workout days. Like, so our full workout days, where it's like kind of like team workouts. I will write this whole weightlifting workout on the board. They get into their teams, they do their whole workout. So I had a student that was like absent and they came and they're like, oh my gosh, I missed the workout. I'm like, well, you're in luck. We're going to do another one next week. We're good. You know, like that's like, I mean, it is what it is.
Well, and I listened to one of your earlier podcasts where you were explicitly talking about the mile run, because there is this mythology about the mile run in PE class, and you basically just made it not a big deal. Like, it's just 4 laps around the track. I think you even offered to run with your kids sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's your approach, which I think is like a beautiful, like, opt-in, way to encourage kids to move their bodies at this, very kind of precarious time in their lives, when the ability to physically educate kids can have, lifelong ramifications, good or bad. Whereas our department, I bet if you asked them, they would probably say, well, we're trying to revolutionize PE class, except their approach was going the exact opposite and kind of doing things from a place of fear mongering. Like, everything is a huge deal.
Yes. And that's exactly, like, to me, that's old school PE. Like, the fear mongering, you have to meet this time, you have to, like, that is so old school to me. So, like, I'm like, we're not like that anymore, because guess what? When you're an adult, that doesn't translate. Like, it doesn't translate. Like, the other day I started my period and guess what? I had a bunch of cramps and I canceled my workout. Like, that's life, like that's what's going to happen. So it's like, that's not teaching the kids. Yeah. I was like, guess what? I took a rest day today and I'll work out tomorrow. Like, it's fine. And that's kind of what I try to teach the kids too. So in regards to the mile you were mentioning, that is something that I hear a lot about. And that's when me and one of the other teachers who, was there when I started as well, we were like talking about, like, what do we want to see here? And we don't want people scared to run or scared to do fitness. So something that we had talked about was like, we're not giving you, like, we're not telling you a time you need to beat, right? Or to score, whatever it is. And like, yes, do we still do the fitness gram nationwide? Yes. Do I think it's old fashioned? Yes. But I am supposed to do it as part of my contract, as my job. But we just don't place a lot of emphasis on it because it's just like a tool. You know what I mean? So I tell the kids, I'm like, hey, based on your age group, it says that you should be running under 10-minute mile, like a 10:30 or like 10-minute mile. And I was like, let's be real. Like, most of them can't do that. And it's not because like I'm not doing my job well. We live in a very different time, right? We are a lot more sedentary. And guess what? If I wanted to run a 5K or something, I'm going to have to do that more than once a week training, And if these kids don't have PE every day, and one day I'm doing weightlifting, one day I'm doing yoga, one day I'm conditioning and we're doing running, I can't expect that from them. Like, that's just not like anybody who's a trainer, like, that's just not how it works, So like, I tell the students, like, our goals are going to be different than what this chart says. So like, we do a test in the beginning of the year, just a benchmarker, just to see like, where are we? Like, what's our conditioning like, let's evaluate it. And then from there, we will make goals from their original time. So let's say somebody got like, it took them 1920, right? Okay, next phase. Our goal is like, maybe we get like sub 18. Cool, we're making progress. Maybe we're getting like 16 and we walk less this time, and then we're just, so they're making progress. So I don't feel like they should be penalized because they're making progress in their way,
And this is what I explained to the department head, who was sort of on my next step of like, up the hierarchy to get to getting this change. We had a conversation with the department head about, hey, why don't you grade them on improving them? Oh no, the PFT, or what's now called the fitness gram, requires, and we can, that's probably an entire other podcast.
I know.
For the information I know about the PFT now, but no, we have to do this. I'm like, they teach them running mechanics, teach them not to get injured, help them improve their time. If a kid runs a 15-minute mile at the beginning of the year, help them improve it every so often. Instead, you're still punishing them our kid, prime example, 2 months into the school year, took 3 minutes off of her mile. She still failed that test.
Oh my
We
gosh. And I'm
literally,
over here like, yes, girl.
Yes, exactly.
what adult would not be absolutely thrilled with knocking that?
Yes.
And so we led with effusive praise, and her words, which I will not forget, were, "But I still failed."
That breaks my heart. That makes me so
Yes.
upset.
Yeah.
So, that prompted another batch of emails and phone calls and whatever. But the department head was adamant in accountability. How am I supposed to hold these kids accountable? Because I have to give them this PFT, which she was going off of old, outdated, whatever the old standards used to be for the PFT that included weighing kids and getting their BMI. So
Yeah.
they were not supposed to be going off of that because DOE says, no, we're not using that anymore. But our school and the district said no more weighing the kids. Our school decided they knew better, and this was their way of still working things in. So that PFT mile time was tied into this mile grading policy
The rest of the year, because of this
Interesting.
this way that they were implementing this test to kind of like hang over, I'm not saying they intended to do this, but it effectively hangs over the kids' heads, because depending on the outcome of that, they may have to do it all again in 10th grade PE with no ability to exempt from it. And so her comment to us on this conference call, this department head, about the PFT led us to then go to the state to find out what the standards actually are, because our understanding was the district had discontinued the weighing. So just so everybody understands what the non-PE teachers, the old standards in California were they would collect kids' body weights, calculate their BMI off of that, assign them a healthy VO2 max depending on the outcome of their mile time, with a standardization based off of BMI. And I think, as I'm saying it, and anybody who could, hear this would think like, okay, this is incredibly flawed.
Yeah, you're like, what? So what is
Yeah. So and to clarify, we're a one high school district, which for us as parents gives us fewer people to talk to, but it also means that policies that get in place have no checks and balances from multiple schools within a district.
Yes.
So there's that as well. But we did know that our district had discontinued the weighing portion of the policy, because I think that was something that everybody outside of the actual department, for the most part, could agree was flawed.
Yeah. That was a big problem for the community in general. It was one of the big parents community was like, why are they weighing these kids? I mean, amongst other issues with the PE department, that was a big one. And they did I heard from the superintendent's mouth at the beginning, I guess middle of last school year, what he asked me on the phone, he said, this has nothing to do with the kids being weighed, because we have told the school to not do that. They are not allowed to do that. So, and like I said, we can get into a whole thing on the PFT, but my takeaway is that the PE department decided they were going to do things a certain way. And that was that. This is our grading policy. Kids need to participate. They need to be here. If they're not here, we're basically going to punish them. If they don't, run this fast, they're not being held accountable. And I know the fitnessgram or the PFT also allows for a walking component to in that so they could have definitely done a workaround. There were lots of options, but the grading policy was a big issue.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's the thing that's really hard. Like, as an educator, hearing that some schools are still doing things a certain way when we have so much information out there, and you're just like, oh my gosh, let's shake it up. Let's shake it up, guys. Like, there's just no need for it. But because it's the same thing, like, this is how we've always done it, and that's the thing that to me is a red flag when that's the response I get. I'm like, wait a minute, like, doesn't mean it's right. This is just one way that you're doing things. So if a parent is listening to this and they want to advocate for their students if something similar is happening in their school with like their PE programs, they're seeing some red flags. What are kind of like the steps that you would recommend, like for them to start here, then go here, then go here? Like, what would you guys recommend?
I sort of take it as and I'm a government employee, so bureaucracy, I feel like you have to start at the bottom before you can go to
Yeah.
the top. So my
Yeah.
initial, like I said, my initial email was to the teacher. Teacher says, I'm not doing any, I don't want this on my hands. Go elsewhere. Then I contacted the principal. I had, there was a few back and forths. I had a meeting with him. My meeting was actually, I thought, very productive. Um, but then he did nothing, and I think it was because he protects his staff to a detriment of the students. I think he does care about the students, but he protects the staff more than he should.
Yeah.
So he finally got me back to the department head. We had that meeting with the department head. She gave us false information. I did some emails to the DOE, got some information from DOE, went back, didn't hear back from her, didn't hear back
Well,
from the
sorry.
principal.
So she actually had some, I thought, like uplifting conversations with the state of California, and there are people at the state level who are actively trying to change things at a state level.
That's
But
awesome to hear.
from the state level, though, they can set there's a disparity in the way the rules are written versus the way that they are being enforced, which is again another can of worms. But the encouraging thing was that the state, was on board with these changes. But the problem, what would have been really helpful in our situation is if we could have just had the state step in and say, hey, don't do that. But the state ultimately has no authority. So, but we took screenshot of the email, the explicitly timely communicated email from the state saying, nope, this is the way it is, forwarded it back to the principal, and then nothing.
Nothing. So then I emailed I forwarded all my emails and all this information to the district. I think I reached out to several people. I got a response back from the superintendent, who then we had a phone call and we talked for almost an hour. And he says, I need a few weeks, but I'll get back to you. And he never got back to me. I followed up with an email. I didn't hear back from him. And then I went to the board and emailed them. I got some responses back. And then it was the end of the school year.
Wow.
And then, but an important thing happened at the end of the school year, which is the actual administration of the PFT for ninth graders. So our ninth grader was going through the PFT. You want to talk about?
And then she messaged me and said, hey, they are weighing us. And I said, don't you dare step on that scale. And she said, you got to email somebody. Yeah. And she said, you have to email somebody. I can't tell them no. And I said, that's fine. I'll email. Nobody responded to my email. I picked up the phone and I called the school and I said, get the principal on the phone. I'm not hanging up. Put him on the phone right now. And I proceeded to have a moment that I'm not necessarily ashamed of. I could have acted a little bit less impulsively in the words I chose and the tone of my voice, but I was really angered for these kids because they're not like mine. It's not speaking. They can't speak up.
Yeah.
And the department decided to do things that they were explicitly told not to do.
Yeah.
So I told the principal, quote unquote, you have no control of your staff and you don't care about your students. And my kid better not be weighed, and you had better stop this policy. And less than 30 minutes later, I got an email back that said it's effective. They are not going to be weighed anymore. So
sometimes you gotta get a little, a little sassy, a little assertive, right?
It was something we were, like I said, we're very passionate about. Like, these kids shouldn't be going through these things. They shouldn't be held to standards that the state no longer requires. They were doing things and the state will tell you, like, these are outdated, but it's hard to get the law changed.
Yeah.
So, and they can't enforce. The DOE says that we cannot enforce this. So we did. That was one step, and then summertime happened, and we got a school schedule. She wasn't given her PE2 waiver despite being a student athlete, a straight A student, and
Wow.
she wanted another academic course. She spends a ton of hours in her school sports team where she can accumulate those PE hours that are required, where she's loving running. because it's no longer
It took a
being
minute.
tied to a
Trying to
grade.
get back there.
Yeah.
And maybe not loving, but she'll do it with a smile on her face, and we'll come home really happy. But so we got her schedule. I called numerous people and was told she failed the PFT. And the new the new PFT requirement, or I don't know, whatever you have to turn into the state, is just a participation. So as long as they show up and participate, they don't even have to make an attempt at a push-up. I'm sorry. Yeah. It doesn't have to be completed. It just has to be they tried. That is the only requirement of the state now, for students to try. So if they walk a mile and it takes them 20 minutes, the only thing that you're reporting to the state is that they participated.
Yeah.
Not a time, nothing. But they failed her based on something, and
It was like the sit and reach or something.
yeah, it was some weird curl up.
Yeah.
It was the curl up that
Curl up. That's right.
for whatever reason her very athletic body can't do. But
Also, those are really hard. I actually think sit-ups are easier for kids than curl-ups.
yeah, I couldn't do
every time
either.
I demo them, I'm like, these are really hard. Like, we're asking the kids to do this.
Yeah, so that's what I was told, is she failed based on that one component. And then I did some more research because she really wanted an academic class. She did not want to be in PE, and I understand this. She's college bound, and I'm going to do what I can. I'm advocating for my kid. So I did a lot of research. The very responsive DOE people, back and forth emails, somebody finally just called me and said, let's talk this out, and explain to me what the law says. And so I sent all this information back to the principal and said, please take her out of this PE class. She should get the waiver. I think I included somebody from the district. I talked to a assistant superintendent at the district, and the principal tried to tell me what the law stated. And I then, I work in the legal field. So I went back and said, no, this is what the law states. And if you can't interpret it to make it do what you want it to do, which is what he was doing. And I don't know, maybe it wasn't long after I sent that final email that said the law says this and you can't interpret it. Our teenager messaged me and said they're taking me out of PE and I'm getting journalism. And I think I called her. I was at work, and then I ran up and down my hallways at work, just hollering. And I felt like I had won another battle. So I got the weight. We got the weight thing taken care of. I got the, and then they had to address because it was technically, she didn't get a waiver. It was a special grant by the district. But I think they had to do it based on what the law says, and what they shouldn't have done it. It's either an all or nothing thing, not that you can't then choose that the kids pass 3 of the 5 components or 2 of the whatever it is, right? So it was that. So that was another big win, which that has also been changed. It's another policy that the PE department and the school has changed. Then Andrea spoke at the school board.
Well, and my purpose in doing that was we'd gotten, like, our teenager had gotten what she needed. We had to fight tooth and nail for some very straightforward things, but we got what our kid was protected. But it just, I had such a bad taste in my mouth, and we've been athletes our entire lives. Movement is an incredibly important part of our lives. So we knew, based on our, extensive experience, how the kids were being set up to fail. And it just, it gutted me, like I have friends who, have been athletes their entire lives. I have friends who have not moved since high school PE because they were, the last kid finishing the mile. And that's the experience that stuck with them. And you can't treat a mandatory class like, the ROTC, right? You have to, these kids, regardless of, whether they like sports, whether they like movement or not, they have to be given the opportunity to be educated. And
Yep.
I also just, I kind of kept your situation as like this beacon, because your kids probably, work harder, for lack of a better term, than the majority of kids under these, old school, as you put it, um, class styles, but it's all
Yeah.
opt in. You're inviting the kids to do this, and you make it look really cool, and you have this great, environment that you've cultivated, all of these positive feedback loops, just supporting each other. And so
Yeah.
I just, if it just was so overtly harmful that we just could not let it go. So I went to
Yeah.
the school board, and just, and this was also one thing that we took away, was that, these we elect these folks, like these are our elected school board.
Yep.
We're actually seeing this in action. And admittedly, I don't know that I would have gone to a school board meeting had we not had this experience. I now would encourage everybody to go to a school board meeting, like once a semester if you can, just to see, it was an interesting experience seeing what else was going on. But my purpose was basically to say out loud, this is what the P department is expecting of kids. They're being set up to fail. The policies for absence have not been amended since the onset of COVID, and kids will regularly run sick because of the penalty for missing class and for having to make it up, etc. And they were horrified. I To their credit, they were. I had a very visceral reaction from the majority
Wow.
of the board
That's
members.
good.
Yeah, it was really affirming.
And as she said, they are, for people who want to make changes, that within parents who want to make changes for their kids, go to these school board meetings and email your school board, the people you vote in to be on the school board. They are there for you. I have, most of them, anytime I've emailed them, I've received a response, and they did take this. They put it on the agenda almost immediately after Andrea spoke. It was on the next month's agenda, and when I went back and watched that school board meeting, they asked very, very good questions, insightful questions, thoughtful questions. They put it on the principal, and they were actually a little upset that nobody from the PE department showed up. And this is where, again, principals protecting his staff
Yeah.
to the detriment of the kids, because he was, and maybe that's, he's taken accountability for all of that, but it's really that department that may put those standards into place. Those policies have been in place since before his time becoming principal of the high school.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh, it's so wild to me, because it's like, that literally is why I became a PE teacher, because I know that's how things were. And I was like, we can't have this anymore. Like, I was like, this is not okay. But like, definitely part of my mission to educate more PE teachers that, like, hey, we can do things different now. Like, let's do things, let's just like shake it up. Let's do things differently.
I said back when I first talked to the first person I talked to, why not help these kids find joy in movement?
Yes.
And I just, and I believe that fully. And a big takeaway, I think I said this numerous times to the principal as well, and he used my line in his speech to the school board when they came and spoke about the grading policy changes in the December meeting that they had.
But like, it was his line.
Yeah,
like he was defending. Oh, this is what we're about. But
like,
and I was like, hey, I said that. I said that
familiar.
back in September 2022.
You're like, do I get a mention? Do I get a quote?
No, I know what, and I know we weren't the only parents. I know there were a few other parents that reached out. So it took a little village. It was a tiny little village.
Yeah.
But, like I said, I told somebody I was going to die on that hill, and I made the change because I know we have another kid going through the school system, and he's probably going to struggle a little bit with PE, and that's okay. I don't necessarily want, and I think he does okay now, but there's no way he's going to run. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but he's not running a 7:30 mile.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But you tell a kid like that you're not going to run, you're going to fail every time. He's going to, it is, he's going to hate PE, he's going to
Yeah.
hate running. And I don't want that. We do too much
Yeah.
movement. We're too, the kids are involved in too many, activities and things like that for them to hate something that should be enjoyed. And I agree. It should not be like a throwaway class. I
Yeah.
absolutely believe that physical education is important for, and just as important as math, but in a different way. But you don't have to be held to like these standards that are
Yeah.
just crazy.
That was actually one
Yeah.
thing that I got from the communication with the school board is, and in the questioning that they had for the principal was, you know, it's not hard to find people who relate to a bad PE class experience, unfortunately.
Yep.
But it can be a mobilizing, point of topic of conversation with these people in charge. That if you remember this, you now have actual power to change it. And believe it or not, I hate the idea that kids are inherently lazy and they just don't want to move. I don't think
Yeah.
that's accurate. I think that kids may have you know trauma with involving their body. Their bodies are changing. They're just, when you have something involving bodies, I feel like you just have to be next level, judicious in what you're asking of them.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And it's interesting because I think about the population I work with. I work at an all girls school. So many different types of bodies, so many different types of backgrounds. And I feel like if I came in with that old school mentality, it would not be fun. I think I would have lower participation. There'd be a lot more fear, especially since a lot of our students are like very academic and they want to do well. They would be so stressed out. And it would cause a lot of problems. And it's interesting because I kind of noticed a difference too when I shifted from like my first year there, feeling the pressure. Like, obviously, I was doing my own thing, but even like, teaching some like sports units, like more traditional ones, like people did. And I was just like, the participation is not the same. I was like, the vibe is different. I was like, we're switching it up. And when I started like the weightlifting program, it was a game changer. Like now all of a sudden it was like 100, they all participated like all the time, but this was different. This was like all hands on deck. Everyone was participating, like kids were excited. So they got to socialize and get strong. Like it was just a whole different thing. And that's when like I really got to see like firsthand, like I knew it would. I was like, yeah, this is so much better than that. Like, look at these kids, like excited to like, I can write a workout on the board and like they know what to do and they're like excited and there's like camaraderie and like that social health, mental health, physical component. And it was just so different. So
Yeah.
I just admire you both so much for doing this and advocating for not only your kids, because I know it started that way, but like you literally affected the whole school and district. So I just think like, bravo for that. And hopefully, some parents get inspired, by this to create some change in spaces that are still a little behind in the times and that need a little push.
Well, thank you for, we need more teachers, PE teachers like you, to do the same. You're doing, a lot of the heavy lifting. And I hope that other PE teachers are inspired by what you do and what you put out there and how you make the kids feel. Because I think it's really important. Like I said, PE is an important component of your high school life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And it can
well, I
be like
appreciate that.
it can be an opportunity, it can be like an outlet. It can be a source of stress relief.
Yes,
And I
100%. They're
think that's
sitting down
beautiful.
all day. Now they get to
Yeah.
move and like
Yeah.
hang out. Like, what other class do you get to like hang out with your friends and listen to music and like move your body and run around? I'm like, have fun.
Exactly.
It should be fun. So I have one final question that I ask all of my podcast guests, and it is, what advice would you share with your teenage self and teens today?
You want me to go first?
It doesn't. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was thinking about this. Be brave enough to suck at something new. And you now have the power to go on social media and see anything that you could ever conceive of doing done perfectly. And that's super inspiring, but it can also sometimes put people off if they maybe struggle with something that they're trying for the first time. But no matter what it feels like at first, if you want to do it and you're going to keep showing up to it, it will get better and you will get better. And that's awesome.
I love that.
I would just say, don't be afraid to speak up. Respect is earned. It's not just a given. And I say that for a kid thinking that all adults are automatically, required to respect them, but respect is earned. So don't be afraid to speak up and use your voice.
Yeah, I love that. No, and honestly, like even as a teacher, especially now that I work with older students, I used to teach elementary school. So they're very just like, whatever you say, teacher, and when you get to middle school and high school, it's a lot different. And it's been a lot of growth for me too, because sometimes if something happens and I say something and maybe a student responds and I'm like, never thought of it that way. Or like, you know what? I'm sorry. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, and just being able to like not feel like I'm up here all the time, and that like old relationship. And it's very interesting, but I think this is fabulous advice for teens. And I love that. Usually I ask my guests, how can we support you and where can we direct people? But maybe for this one, what do you think? Like, directing people to their superintendents.
Just like wherever you live, like Andrea said, go check out a school board meeting. At the very least, if you're lucky enough, like where we live, our districts record them and put them on their website. Go watch one or see what's on the agenda. Sometimes I think our district also live streams the school board meetings, but know who your representatives are, who you vote for. And I think that's really important as a member of your community. Know who the people are that you can reach out to if you want something to change. Start there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And honestly, this has even inspired me to get to a meeting because I have not been to one in years. And I, especially like as somebody who wants to see a lot of change advocated in the realm of physical education, I think this would be great for me to kind of pop in and see what's going on and who's in charge so I can start figuring out who I need to talk to. I love that. Well, thanks to everyone for listening to the Pretty Little Lifters podcast. And I'm so grateful for our guests, Andrea and Kalea, for joining us on this episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will talk to you next episode. Bye.